Well, it's a series now, I guess. And we're doing the boosters. Yeah, alright, sure. Boosters can basically be summed up as team passives you apply to a match before you dive in. And they're in a curious spot right now because it's pretty much universally agreed that the vitality, stamina, and optimization boosters are must-haves 90% of the time, while the rest of them might as well be the Wild West because it's every man for himself. Some people like Experimental Infusion, some people like Arm Resupply, those people are based. Some people even like Dead Sprint, and you know what? That's fine. It's okay to be wrong every once in a while. The fourth booster is basically a flex bot. It's very dependent on the mission type, play styles, and general usefulness. And even though a lot of them are useful, some of them are not. You could even say they're bad. Bad boosters, even. Yeah, that's a good enough intro. I'm gonna guess you already watched the last video. Watch if you haven't. I'm doing the same thing in this one. I'm talking about all the bad boosters, telling you how to best utilize them, and offering possible rebounds. I'll give you the whole spiel about how this video is bound to be opinionated and shouldn't be taken super seriously, but that didn't stop people from being dicks last time, so you know what? Now's your time. If you hate me for daring to have an opinion, I'm saying that like it's new, this is the internet we're talking about here. Now's your chance. You want to leave a nasty comment? You got 5 seconds. Okay, so now that only the adults are left, let's talk about some boosters. Some bad boosters.
I'm in a fight! I need more men!
We're starting off this video with the only group segment with the extra and flexible reinforcement budget boosters. Both of these modify your reinforcements. I'm gonna assume you already know how those work. The extra reinforcement booster grants 1 extra reinforcement per player, meaning if you bring this into a full lobby, you have 24 lives total, meaning every player can effectively die 6 times each. And the flexible reinforcement booster will decrease the reinforcement cooldown by 25%, taking it from 2 minutes to 1 minute 30. Neither of these are great, even if one is infinitely worse, and they both have the same problems. 20 lives is already very lenient. Every player being able to die 5 times each leaves a lot of wiggle room. Usually if you run out of reinforcements and there's still an objective to do, it's probably already over anyway. These are boosters that just make the worst case scenario a little bit better, when bringing another one entirely could have prevented a mission from getting so dire in the first place. And this is all assuming things do get that desperate. If your team plays well, these are literally doing nothing. This kinda goes against everything a booster should be. Do you know why these ones are good? Because they offer a consistent benefit that persists throughout a whole match. If you don't get value out of any of these, you're probably playing the game in the least fun way possible, or you're just an absolute god and never getting hit. These are not helping me or my team all game. And even when they are, one of them is about as helpful as a mommy kiss on a shotgun blast. The extra reinforcements is alright, relatively. 4 extra reinforcements, assuming you have a full team, is something. It's definitely better than some of the other boosters coming up and completely knocks the other reinforcement one out of the park, that's for sure. 4 extra lives is 4 extra lives. What's already a lot of wiggle room is now even more wiggle room. This is really helpful if you have those kind of teammates. You know what I mean when I say that. The guy whose deaths are going into the double digits, or the pair who have like 8 deaths each. I've had so many scenarios where we were stuck with less than ideal Helldivers who died a lot and were also very prone to friendly fire, chewing through our lives like it's an all-you-can-eat buffet. It's really useful for situations like that, because obviously, lives are shared. If I had a quid for every time I'm only on like my 2nd or 3rd death, but because everyone else has died so much, I still have to wait for the reinforcements to go off cooldown, I could pay someone to make good, coherent scripts. For that kind of situation, it's pretty good, but it isn't foolproof. When you're playing with randoms, you obviously have no idea what their skill level is, and rank isn't always a good indication. I've had level 40 marshals only die like once, while the 10-star general is hemorrhaging our reinforcement budget. If you play with them for multiple missions, you can plan accordingly, but first time around, unless you got a hunch, you cannot predict something like that happening. And even then, all it is 4 extra lives. Once they're gone, they're gone. But to be fair, if you've died that many times, the odds probably weren't in your favor anyway. This one is just kinda whatever. It's definitely helpful if stuff does go to hell in a handbasket, but not to brag, I religiously play Super Helldive. I hate playing any difficulty below that. And before I made this video, I've never used or felt the need to use this thing, even against the automatons. Bots are definitely the deadliest faction. I feel like most people would agree with me on that, so they obviously have the highest kill rate. Normally against bugs and squids, my team will die about 5 to 8 times, but I've had a lot of bot missions where there's like 1 reinforcement left by the time we get to extraction because they do not play around. However, we have something the enemies don't. Resolve. For some reason, when you get to about 3 or less reinforcements, everybody will collectively lock the fuck in and magically become the best team ever. I've had so many missions come back from the brink, it's crazy. It definitely has a noticeable effect and doesn't downright gimp your team unlike some other boosters coming up. I would still much rather have roided out... am I really getting fucking cool right now? I would still much rather have roided out syringes, or better movement speed, or turrets than 4 extra lives. And while we're on the topic of noticeable effects, the flexible reinforcement budget is good because... yeah, no, I got nothing, this thing just fucking sucks. And why is that, you might ask? Well, let me break it down for you, Mark.
No, you're not doing this joke again. It's over. Stop.
All this does is make it so that in the worst case scenario, your team running out of reinforcements, you're waiting a whopping 30 less seconds for them to go off cooldown. Did I miss the part where this is supposed to help me? Dedicating a whole booster to this specific function is definitely a choice. With armor, I honestly don't mind the passives too much. As much as I wish some of them were better. At the end of the day, if you like the way it looks or the passive, who cares? Despite what some people thought, and by some people I mean this one guy who I'm pretty sure didn't even watch the video, I really do not think it matters if you bring a bad armor passive. I don't really see a problem with it except maybe this one. Boosters don't get that luxury. Boosters are purely there to benefit you and your team. If it's bad, it's just bad. So wasting a booster slot to reduce the cooldown of reinforcements by an astronomical 30 seconds is, what's another word for bad? Atrocious, there we go, haven't used that one yet. Don't get me wrong, 4 extra reinforcements isn't the best, but it at least extends the fail window by actively increasing your lives. This thing just sits on its ass until things have already gone to shit, and even when it does decide to contribute, it's the most half-assed effort ever because all it's doing is decreasing a time by half a minute. Even when it does work, it ain't doing much. Sure, a minute and a half is definitely better than 2 minutes, but in HELLDIVERS time, that's still forever. A lot can happen in that time span. It would still take 4.5 minutes to reinforce a whole team from 1 to 4 with this. I honestly don't recommend either of these, but if you're gonna run either of these two, run the extended budget. There's at least a tangible effect. So, what can you do to fix that? Well, the first rework concept I had is a very common one, but something I still think would be cool to see is to just mix the 2 boosters into one. Flexible's effect honestly feels like it's some kind of secondary bonus anyway. I don't think this would magically make it amazing, but it would at least fill a niche. If you're going into a mission where you're expecting a lot of casualties, it would be really good insurance, since if shit does start hitting the fan, you have this. I could maybe see that happening, but you would have to create a completely new booster in the process, so just in case you wanted to buff them separately. For the extended budget, I'd just remove the player requirement, make it so that you always have the 4 extra lives, or make it so that it would give some kind of small buff if you were below a certain reinforcement threshold, or maybe even give it the ability to allow reinforcements to be called in scenarios where they otherwise wouldn't be able to. Just something to give it a bit of an edge, because I honestly don't think it's the worst thing ever, and a small little buff would actually make me consider running it. But the flexible budget, yeah, this thing needs some serious work. The idea I came up with was to make it so that when you have this booster equipped, lives would always recharge, not just when you run out. So basically, if you were below the maximum amount of reinforcements, they'd slowly regenerate until they were at maximum again, at something like 50% the normal speed. What use would this have? That is a great question, actually. For real, this was just the first idea that came to my head, and I'm not putting days worth of thought into any of these rebalances. It would definitely be good for extended missions or ones with multiple risky objectives, as it would let you recover a bit between each fight, but it would all fall on the speed, because if the regeneration was too slow, it'd still be dog shit, albeit not quite as dog shit as it is right now. but if you made it too short, it could be game breaking. So it would definitely take some work, but honestly, it would be cool to see. You can maybe even let it keep its old effects too, since I don't think throwing that in there is going to magically break it or anything. As is right now though, maybe bring the extra reinforcements if you're doing one of these missions because you're probably going to die a lot doing those objectives, and pretend the flexible budget doesn't exist.
Man, I'm dead.
Have you ever just said something and know you're going to get shit for it? This is one of those times. I'm going to ruffle some feathers, tussle some jimmies, and possibly even piss on some Cheerios with this opinion. Tell you the truth, I'm probably going to get a hit put out on me or something like that. So since I'm going to die, I'll just say it. I do not care for the Dead Sprint booster. Dead Sprint is... It is something. This booster allows you to run even when you're out of stamina at the cost of health. I forgot to write this down, but it cannot kill you by the way. I would dox points for the fact that this thing basically requires the Vitality booster, but considering that's one of the big three, that seems a little bit unfair. Not that it really saves it though, because... well, you know what, let's just make a quick list of why I think this thing is bad. 1. Stamina is expendable. Health is not. I regenerate stamina. Very quickly actually, especially with the stamina booster. I do not regenerate health. At first I thought if you ran the stim pistol with this thing, that could maybe be useful, but that already completely refills stamina anyway. 2. Kinda repeating what I just said, but stamina doesn't take that long to recharge, and fun fact, crouching and proning make it recharge faster. 3. There are entire stratagems purely devoted to mobility. It's a lot less of an investment to spend one of your 4 stratagem slots on one of these two than it is to use your only booster slot on this. 4. The stamina booster exists. And 5, well, that's kinda it, but I do have more to say. I really wanna like this thing, and there are some people who do, but after playing a few missions with it, I'm not gonna lie, I barely noticed it, because believe it or not, you're not gonna be running 24/7 in this game. In fact, there are a lot of ways you'll just end up regenerating stamina naturally because as long as you aren't running, you're getting it back. Are you shooting at enemies? Your stamina's gonna regenerate. Doing pretty much any objective, your stamina's gonna regenerate. Static reloading, you guessed it, it's gonna regenerate. The only thing besides sprinting that's gonna tuck you out are melee attacks, and I'm not gonna repeat what I said last video, or diving. But unless you're playing this game like it's Black Ops 6, you're obviously not gonna be diving everywhere, and it's not like it takes that much stamina away anyway. Even if you're constantly sprinting, is it really that bad to just stop for a couple of seconds, then start running again instead of bringing this? Losing health is so much more impactful than stamina. Running out of one just forces me to slow down a bit, while running out of another will kill me. You could maybe say that this is useful to avoid or run away from danger. It's better to run away from something than walk away from it. And all I have to say to that is, firstly, good luck if you're wearing heavy armor. Secondly, you don't need this booster to do that. When a swarm of enemies are about to show up, the game doesn't exactly try to hide it. You are given more than enough warning to get away from wherever they're coming from. And plus, you can always just dive when something's really close to you. You can dive whenever you want in this game, even when you're completely out of stamina. So long as you learn to stop running every once in a while and catch your breath, I really do not see how this could be useful. In fact, if you want some bolt marrow advice, try to wait until you're out of stamina to do a static reload, because that way you're basically killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And this is all without pretending this exists. And this as well, actually. The stamina booster gives me more stamina and lets me regen it faster, while the experimental infusion gives me a brief damage and movement speed buff whenever I stim. The enhancer is just a good all-rounder, while the infusion is a little bit more specific, but still generally useful because you're probably going to end up stimming at least a few times every mission. And it allows for some really fun combos. This just lets me run for a little while longer. The only use I got from this thing was making it a lot more obvious when I was out of stamina, which made it easier to know when to stop running and let it regenerate. There wasn't any moment where I could see an opportunity to take advantage of the effect. It's not even fun. If it was fun, who would care? But like, does anyone find this thing fun? If you're not going to be useful, the least you can do is be entertaining, but it fails at that too. I have nothing for this. There wasn't any niche use case or fun combo. I'm sorry, I'm sure somebody has found some cool tech with this, but I'm not that guy, pal. I really feel like I need to reiterate that I am a fan of really stupid stuff in games, so something like this should be right up my alley, but if I wasn't capturing footage for this video, I would have never used this thing again. I like the idea of a booster purely devoted to mobility, but in its current form, yeah, this ain't it. but the core idea is there. I'll admit the rebalance that I came up with might be a bit nutty, but screw it, Dead Sprint. While equipped, gives every Helldiver a 10% increase to all forms of movement speed. As health gets lower, movement speed increases, still keeps the old effect. This is really stupid, and the thought process behind it is also probably really stupid, but I think instead of nerfing all the good boosters, the bad ones should just be brought up more in line and be given more interesting effects, noticeable effects, because a lot of these can't just be fixed by simple stat changes. I don't know if that's the best balance philosophy, I especially don't know if that's Arrowhead's balance philosophy, but I just think if every booster is kinda nuts, none of them are. Because I can admit, this is a really stupid idea, but it at least has a little bit more something going on. The idea was pretty simple. Movement speed is good, so being able to get more of it through different means is also good. And it benefits you if you don't want to use the original dead sprint function. That is another problem this thing has, by the way. If you don't use the actual dead sprint part of this is doing nothing for you. But if you still want to use it, it's still there, and the new effects combo with it because obviously as your health gets lower, you get faster. The increase would have to be very small, maybe for like every 10 missing HP, you gain a 2 or 3% movement speed increase, something just noticeable enough. I like the idea of someone deliberately keeping themselves at critical health just so they can move at like Sonic the Hedgehog speed, and it would combo with the jump pack because the distance from that is dependent on the speed you're moving when you use it. I don't know if this would actually make it good, but would it at least be more fun? Maybe, I don't know, this is just a hypothetical scenario, I'm not a psychic, but it probably would.
UAV online.
The UAV Recon booster. I need you to be real with me, how many people's response to me saying that was, oh yeah right, that's a thing. This booster is the guy who shows up to the 9 to 5, half asleep, does the bare minimum amount of work, and clocks out as soon as his shift ends. He's doing something, but like, not really. It's the mediocre employee booster. While you have this thing equipped, all Helldivers will have their radar, this thing, increased by 50%. This can combo with the scout passive and especially the nuclear radar ship upgrade due to it being a percentage increase. If you have both of these, your radar range will be jacked all the way up to 112.5 meters, which is cool, I guess, but just like a second slice of cake, do you really need it when one slice was enough? With nuclear battery, the range is already perfectly fine, and this is definitely just a personal thing, but I actually dislike how big the range is with this booster. Look at how cluttered my minimap is. It looks like it has acne. Not to mention the minimap isn't exactly the best source of info because it only has 2 different dot sizes to represent enemies, and that's not always indicative of danger. For some reason, Devastators only get normal sized dots, but Scout Striders get big ones, even though Striders are much easier to take down than Devastators, at least in my opinion. There's no sort of special ping for super heavy enemies or unique ones either, you're stuck with small red dots and big red dots. Figure the rest out yourself. So making it bigger, if anything, just makes the problem worse, because again, clutter. Well, maybe this thing can be useful for finding points of interest or enemy structures. And I mean, if you're chronically short-sighted, yeah, but is a spore spewer or gunship facility that hard to spot? It's almost as if they were deliberately designed to be big structures that you can see from really far away. Even stuff like automaton mortar or anti-air encampments, which don't have big structures attached to them, still have the red danger zone thing. Short of stalker layers, enemy structures are intentionally designed to be noticeable. Same for helpful structures like siege sites, they're pretty hard to miss. And as for minor points of interest, well, firstly, why are you bringing a booster specifically to find those into a public game? If you want to farm, that's fine, but do that in your own time. But even those aren't super hard to spot from a distance, excluding like 2 of them. I'd also talk about how atmospheric spores exist, or how LiDAR stations remove one of the 2 uses this thing has, but that just feels like punching down at this point. I honestly feel bad for this thing. One ship upgrade makes it much less viable when it already wasn't that good to begin with. LiDAR stations remove a core part of its utility. One operation modifier, literally, I'm using that word correctly in this context, literally renders this thing useless. Sure, it's consistent because your radar is an ever-present action that happens completely out of your control, but consistency doesn't mean good. Unless you absolutely despise stalkers and stalker layers, you really would never have a reason to run this. It's not even the best booster for farming, I think. It might get boosted up a bit if you run the scout passive with it. I didn't check because I don't want to be that guy who's spamming pings every 5 seconds. but I don't think this one uber-specific combo is going to magically make it a must-pick. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. This booster is one of a kind, because it's the only one devoted to information gathering, but in its current form, all it does is give me information I can already get perfectly fine without it. There wasn't any one rework idea I could come up with, just a bunch of effects that I think fit the theme of being based around info, so I guess I'm just gonna rapid fire these. It would be cool if while you had this booster equipped, you could see the effective area of enemy structures. With something like a stratagem jammer, you would be able to see its area of effect on the minimap, same for stuff like spore spewers. Speaking of structures, it would also be cool if this thing just instantly highlighted every single one as soon as you spawn into a mission, similar to a LiDAR station minus the marking points of interest effect. This would allow you to instantly know about stuff like Stalker Nest and Thief Artillery, making things just generally more efficient. Yes, I know you can see them on the minimap if you look really hard, but obviously this removes that whole thing of having to look on the minimap in the first place. It could give certain enemies a special type of ping on the minimap that persists even when they're out of your radar range. It could highlight enemy patrols on the minimap. Maybe it could even let you see higher tier enemies through walls. I don't know. There's a million different effects you can do with a booster all about intel gathering, but instead we got what's basically a ship upgrade. I really don't know what to say except don't bother with this. It's not the worst thing you could bring, but that doesn't mean it's a good thing to bring.
So I am confusion. Why is this one Kansas?
I remember when this booster first came out, people claimed it was really good, but then like a week later, everybody collectively forgot this thing existed. It might have just been a vocal minority, but I swear for a bit, people were saying this thing was useful. I'm only telling you this because it's the one interesting thing about localization confusion. This booster takes the cake for the most vague description. Increases time between enemy encounters. That could mean a bajillion different things. Little side tangent, why do none of the boosters just tell you exactly what they do? Some of them are so vague. The muscle enhancement is another good example, and that sucks because the description probably makes a lot of people think it's not good, even when it's actually on the upper echelon of boosters. Even when stuff does tell you what it does, knowing the exact stats would be nice. What this thing actually does is affect enemy reinforcement calls. So when a watcher signals for a warp ship, a commissar shoots his flare in the sky, or a terminate does that weird butt race thing where like all the orange smoke goes in the air. And as for how it actually affects them, it increases the cooldown for enemies being able to call in reinforcements again by 10%, and increases their arrival time by 10%. It apparently won't affect scripted enemy reinforcements, so stuff like geological survey calls, or detector towers apparently, even though those aren't scripted. I'm just going off of the information I have, so I'm going to assume that's all correct, sorry if it's not. Because after playing some games, I felt zero changes. Like, none. I'm sure there was probably like some small single-digit second differences, but the game played basically the same. Remember how I said Deadspring got gimped by 2 different stratagems? Yeah, this is the same, except much worse. Bot reinforcements are brought in from ships. Ships you can destroy. With what? Just a few different things. Terminids? Whoa, napalm barrage be upon ye. And Illuminate? You don't even need a stratagem. CSAM sites are right there. In fact, they're everywhere. It feels like you get at least 2 every mission against the squids. Even if you don't like the argument of just use a stratagem instead, that's still a moot point against the squids, and maybe bots, but SAM sites feel much rarer against those guys. If for some reason you don't want to sacrifice 1 stratagem slot, enjoy the 10% I guess. Can you tell I don't have much to say? I swear I've got all the time and energy in the world to shit on stuff people a lot more talented than me made, but I don't actually have anything to ramble on about. A 10% increase to reinforcement cooldowns. I didn't even know enemies had reinforcement cooldowns. The 10% increased arrival time is probably a bit better, but is that booster worthy? The worst part is, it should be really good for me, since as I said earlier, I exclusively play Super Helldive, where like there is an enemy reinforcement call every 2 minutes it feels like. So if I'm barely noticing this thing, people on lower difficulties probably think it's bugged or something. This is another one that on paper sounds really cool, but in execution, well, I'll let you know how well they execute it when I actually notice it. A booster that nerfs enemies instead of buffing you is ripe for potential effects, and it'd be cool to see other possible effects. So here's another spitballing session I guess. This thing could maybe reduce the quantity of enemy patrols or how big the patrols actually are. It could reduce the effectiveness of offensive structures, like reducing the range of stratagem jammers slightly, or reducing the spawn rate of nests. You could even apply that to smaller ones too. Maybe it could reduce the range of automaton turrets, reduce the spawn rate of bug and bot mines and illuminate shock towers, maybe highlight them on the map. And if you want to tie it back to reinforcements, maybe it could increase the time before reinforcements are actually called. You know how the enemies that call in reinforcements have to do that animation before it actually happens? Maybe this booster could make that animation take longer. That's not my idea, it's this, guys. I just found it while I was looking at what the Reddit thought of this booster. I like to do that sometimes in case there's information I might not know. Just like the UAV Recon, you can do a lot with this booster concept. But as is right now, well, if I actually notice a difference, I'll be sure to let you know. Discount muscle enhancement. Straight to the point, I know, but that's my advice for this. Just use the muscle enhancement. That booster reduces the movement speed penalties of all this stuff by 75%, while this lets you recover from 3 different effects 50% faster. But I'm convinced that's not true because it still felt like slowing effects lasted forever. Sorry in advance, but this entire section is just going to be me bigging up the muscle enhancement. Even if this was the only booster that could deal with CC, I still don't think it would be good. But the fact that it has to compete with this, it feels about as fair as matching up a newborn kin against a Spetsnaz officer with 30 years of experience. Firstly, the amount of stuff that they affect. I already said it, but it bears repeating. Motivational Shocks, muscle enhancement. Already not looking good, but there's more. Out of the 3 effects reduced by Motivational Shocks, only one of them is a consistent problem, and even then that's only if you're firing on the bug front. But muscle enhancement, well, not only does that reduce the potency of bug acid as well, but it also lets you move through rough terrain much easier and seriously reduces the effects of snow and sandstorms. Physically at least, you still can't see shit during them. That's another problem too. The way that they actually counteract crowd control. This is definitely just a personal preference, but I'd much rather have the actual effects of a debuff reduced than just reduce how long it affects me for. One basically renders the effects of the debuff mute, while the other just makes it not last as long. Again, that's definitely a personal thing. I'm sure there are people out there who would much rather have the debuff go away sooner than not affect you as much, but to me, I just think that Muscles is way better at dealing with it. You're basically choosing between reducing the duration of 2 debuffs by a little bit, I'd say 3, but nobody seems to know what stuns are, or reducing the effects of 1 less debuff, since apparently muscle enhancement doesn't do anything to affect ice flowers, but also reducing the movement speed penalties of all this stuff by 75%, basically rendering them pointless. I also forgot to mention this, but ice plants also drain all your stamina, and guess what? This booster does nothing to help against that. So against one of the 2 things it helps counteract, it doesn't even counteract one of them that well. Muscles is already kinda situational, but it's almost guaranteed to give at least a little bit of value for any kind of mission that isn't a holdout one. While Motivational Shocks is below average, even if you're going into one of the 2 mission types it helps against. I know each segment has gradually been getting smaller, but that's because there's less and less to talk about each booster. Look at how long this section is. I don't know what else to type. Do you want me to just throw in some random memes so there's at least something going on? I can do that, give me a minute. What memes do I have? All jokes aside, there's nothing else I can really say. If you want to know how to best utilize this, consider bringing it for a second, realize that's fucking stupid, and just bring the muscles instead. Wait, I said the muscles, that's not- This thing has been living in its older brother's shadow for so long, so let's rectify that. Keeping the theme of reducing debuff times, my rework idea would still make it reduce the duration of these 2 effects, but now also, the time you're on fire, and how long EMS equipment affects you for. As well as removing screen flash entirely. You know that thing where when you get hit by toxic gas or charges, your screen will do that like bright white flash thing? That. As well as preventing environmental stuff from draining your stamina. So ice flowers, tremors, and more mushrooms. Want to take it one step further? Well, crippled limbs are debuffs. Kinda. But since those aren't duration based, you could maybe instead make it so that this gives you a brief immunity to it. So instead of you not being able to run the moment your legs break, with this, you'd still be able to run for like 10, 15, 20 seconds, then your character would start acting like their leg is broken. I know this still isn't the best, but short of a full rework, I really don't know what else you can do. besides add a whole bunch more debuffs to this thing to counteract. I'm calling that, by the way. Next update is going to add like 10 new debuffs, and this thing is going to magically become S tier, making this completely outdated.
This is the greatest plan.
Expert Extraction Pilot reduces the time it takes for your extraction shell to come in by 30%. In normal missions, that takes it from 2 minutes to 1:24, and if you're playing with the complex stratagem planning operation modifier, yes, that actually increases how long it takes for your extraction to show up. It will go from 3 minutes to 1:04. I'm not going to insult your intelligence. You know why this is bad. Hell, you probably know why most of these boosters are bad, but I at least pretended you didn't know why. But come on. We all know why Expert Extraction Pilot is hot dookie. It'd be like telling you why ice cream is cold. I'm not even going to suggest a rework. Just search this thing up on the subreddits and you'll find like 50 different rework concepts. The only reason this isn't the last booster I'm covering is because this at least still helps you. The top scientists of the world are still trying to figure out the exact decimal percentage, but it still helps you at the end of the day, whereas the last booster coming up should be akin to treason, and anybody who runs it should be shot on sight. I feel like this image right here perfectly summarizes up Firebomb Hellpods. This booster causes every single Hellpod to create a small fiery explosion, so that's Helldiver Hellpods, sentries, mines, backpack, and support weapons, as well as some mission cool-ins. The explosion deals fire damage, who would have guessed, and damages anything. Anything. It might damage enemies, but it's usually teammates. Case in point, this is literally the only game I played with this booster, by the way. The design of this thing is so ass backwards to me. Who would throw anything other than an airstrike into a group of enemies? Even mines, you usually want to put those in front of them, so the placer thing doesn't get destroyed and they can actually, you know, step on the mines. In fact, you're more likely to call stuff like resupplies or support weapons right next to you, so you can, you know, grab it. A resupply isn't much use in a horde of enemies, so that's out of the picture. Backpack and support weapons are the same, and they have really long cooldowns to boot, so it's not like you can constantly throw them into grooves while they're off cooldown and you still have it. Sentries, again, you want to put them away from the enemies, and as for Helldiver Hellpods, well, you could maybe say this could help you clear out a horde if you drop into them, but there's another problem. The explosion sucks at taking out just about anything. It's small, it's janky, and we're struggling to kill even Voltless from my experience. So if you try and drop into a group of enemies, short of the fodderiest of fodder, I really did not consider that I cannot speak properly, you won't be killing much. Just stick to dropping on big guys. But wait, there's more, because this can damage Helldivers too. Wait, oh my god, dude, that's like the name of the game. Which means you have to be very careful about how you throw your stuff. I sometimes like to throw down a resupply or support weapon right next to me as I'm doing an objective, but with this, well, I'll go fuck myself, I guess. Having to safe distance your own equipment and yourself while dropping in sucks royally. If I'm getting jumped, my last thought is going to be, let me call in the sentry, wait for it to drop down so it can deal mediocre damage. Because that's another problem. Your equipment takes time to cool in, so enemies might move out of the way by the time it's actually landed, which is made even worse by the pitiful range this thing has. There are problems inside the problems with this booster. It's like a layer cake of failure. You could maybe bring in either of the expendable weapons and keep spamming those, but unless you have this tier 5 ship upgrade, why? And even if you have it, why? There are two scenarios to bring this thing in. To fuck with your friends, or to fuck with randoms. Both situations are funny, but only one is acceptable morally. I don't know why you wouldn't just pick an airstrike. There are fire airstrikes for crying out loud. Short of absolute psychopaths, who's gonna keep throwing in all their mission equipment to every horde of enemy they see, just for it to kill like a few scavengers if it's feeling really generous that day? Just like Dead Sprint, I really want this thing to be good, but just like, no. If it at least dealt good damage, that could maybe somewhat make up for the ass-backward method of actually dealing it, but no, not really. The damage is bad. The damage is really bad. In fact, it's not just bad. It is consistently a liability to your team that I think does a better job at killing you than it does the enemies. I will admit I still prefer it to Expert Extraction Pilot because this is at least funny in a very sadistic sort of way, but I will admit this is definitely the worst booster in the game. It's not even a contest. If I see even a single person trying to unironically defend this thing, I'll I don't know, I'll just, I'll look in the mirror really upset, I don't know. This feels like it would be a really simple rework idea. Instead of tying this effect to Hellpods, it should just be its own separate stratagem. Something that you can call in and it creates a small little fiery explosion. Kind of like a Napalm Strike Diet Edition pretty much. That immediately solves like 5 different problems. I can throw my stuff wherever I want again, and this becomes a much more reliable form of damage. Assuming they improved it a bit, which please let it reliably kill Voltless at least, I don't think that's too much to ask for. Or they could just make the range bigger and improve the damage, which would honestly just make it more volatile. But at least then, it could be fun to play around with. But in its current form, don't. Just don't, please. You should probably just bring no booster instead of this. But that's really all I have to say. What do you think of the video? Do you agree with every booster I put here, or do you actually think the Vitality is the worst thing ever because it got nerfed down to only a 10% damage reduction? Yeah, sorry about getting that fact wrong last video, I genuinely had no idea it got nerfed, whoops. Whatever you might think, I hope you at least found the video somewhat entertaining, even if that was like laughing at me. And if you have anything interesting to say, put it down in the comments and there's a good chance I'll read it. But if this video just decides to blow up again and I get like 400 or 500 comments, sorry if I don't get around to responding to yours, it was nothing personal, I just don't have that much time on my hands. Besides that, I hope you had at least an above average day, I hope the rest of your day continues to be above average, and if you're one of those maniacs who bring the Firebomb Hellpods, the darkest pit of hell has come to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, friend.
Check it out, I'm in the house like carpet. And if there's too many heads in my blunt, I won't. I'm here for money. Money.
God fucking damn it, Arrowhead. Of course, right as this video's gonna get done, you have to go and add this stupid fucking thing. At least the drip looks cool though. Holy shit, these outfits look nice. Even if they don't have cowboy hats, which honestly, I don't mind. I think they look alright without cowboy hats. The sample extractor. Do I really have to go over this? I'll be completely honest, as of me writing this, it still hasn't come out. But I've read the description and just like, why? If this was a free booster everyone got, then I honestly wouldn't care, but no. This is our 11th war bond, yet the booster associated with it is going to be best for newcomers, even though I don't think the war bond is going to be very newcomer friendly, because the armor passive is going to work best for secondaries that they won't have yet. But ignoring that, this is somehow worse than Expert Extraction Pilot, because at least that benefits you in-game. This doesn't. Sure, samples can help long term, but in the moment they're basically little paperweights. Plus, you're not even guaranteed to get all the samples. Big enemies aren't always going to die in a convenient place for you to collect them. All 10 of them, because it caps at that, and if you fail the mission, or they don't make it to evac, no samples at all. So wouldn't it just make more sense to bring a booster that can better increase the odds of you surviving so you can get the samples in the first place? I'm not gonna lie, I don't know what Arrowhead was cooking with this one. It's not gonna be good for someone like me, who basically has everything short of a few armors in the superstore, which I don't even need samples for that by the way. But the new player isn't really gonna be gravitated towards it, and even if they are, they're probably gonna play on lower difficulties, which spawn less big enemies. Now this is all obviously an assumption, but I'm going off of my better judgment, and saying this thing is going to be the new second worst booster in the game. I don't think anything is taking first place though with Firebomb Hellpods. So, hey, at least Expert Extraction Pilot has something going for it. It's now the third worst choice. Small victories, man. Small victories. I'm not going to bother coming up with rework ideas or rambling on further because for all I know this could actually be good. Or maybe the community will dog on it so hard Arrowhead will change it, I don't know. But I highly doubt that. I just thought I should bring this up. Alright, for real. Now it's time for the outro.
Check it out, I'm in the house like carpet. And if there's too many heads in my blunt, I won't spark it, I'll put it in my pocket and save it like rocket fuel. Till everybody's gone and it's cool, then I spark it up with my brother. His mama named him Moan, but I call him Moan Lover. And he's more than a cover, he's a quilt. We're putting shit together like the house that John built on a hill. Cause this shit gonna feel like velvet, turtle. My style fits tighter than a girdle. If you hate it, then you can just leave it like Beaver. But in a day or two I'll make you a true believer in me. Cause like the alphabet you'll see, that ism kicks a rhyme, not your everyday soliloquy. Like Chef Boyardee, my rhyme is truly cooking. Peace to Matty Rich, cause he's straight out of Brooklyn, New York. I don't eat pork or swine when I dine. I drink a cup of Kool-Aid, not a big glass of wine or a Heineken. If you have time, I'll drop rhyme again.